you will find once you leave here is that it's easy to kind of feel alone in your own classroom, and you're here in the situation where you've got all of these friends and like-minded people who are studying the same thing as you, and who are excited about what they're doing and all that kind of stuff, and then you go out and you get your first teaching job and you're like, where's everybody? And where do they go? And how do I find them? And you know, you're at such a great place because there's such a wonderfully large network of Florida State graduates who are out there that can be resources for you and comrades in arms and friends and all that kind of thing. And the American Choral Directors Association and all the different iterations that takes the form of in state chapters and local chapters and the national conventions and regional and all that kind of thing. It's a really wonderful network of people and a great resource for all y'all as you continue in your careers and everything like that. And I know I always feel rejuvenated after I go to one of the conventions and get to hear some amazing choirs and get new ideas from people who come and speak and see friends and colleagues that I haven't seen for a long time. So so kudos to you for all being here and being active and all that kind of stuff. And I know it's Friday and the Downton Abbey premiere comes out tonight, so I mean, I didn't know who would show up. I'm going to the Downton Abbey premiere tonight, so I didn't even know if I would be here. No, I'm just kidding. So that's that. So I thought today I would just talk briefly. I'm going to not go on forever. But I wanted to just give a little bit about my background, just being new here. I figured maybe I don't like to talk about myself, but I figured some of you might be interested in just to know a little bit about where I came from and what I've done that brought me here today, and all that kind of thing. And then tell a few stories about things that I think are good things to think about as future choral musicians and future educators and things like that. So you can take away some kind of tangible thing from this whole thing. So I was born in Iowa. It's at the middle of the country.
That's what I got.
We have a real nice population of graduate students here from Iowa. It's making me feel at home, not stuck off in Florida in the middle of nowhere. We've got some good Midwesterners here that have good values and work hard and are honest and all that kind of thing. Know what corn is and all that. So I grew up in a small town in Iowa called Waverly, about a town of 9,000 people. And probably like many of you got into music because people around me were interested in music and good at it or passionate about it. And I had a father who was a music and business double major who did some singing in college and then went into the business world. And I had a mother who was a K through 12 band and choir teacher, K through 12 band and choir in a small consolidated school district in Iowa. She did that for a number of years before my brothers and I were born. So I grew up in a small town, and I also had some really wonderful directors and teachers at a young age. I studied piano since I was in kindergarten with this wonderful lady whose husband was the choir director at my high school, and they were just this cute little couple, and their names are Alan and Patricia Hagen, and I still go see them when I go back to my hometown and say hi and check in to see how they're doing. And she would always make sure his ties were straight in the morning, and she always called him Hagen, and and all this kind of stuff. And they were this wonderful example of being in that profession and having I think a real servant's heart to the whole thing, that they wanted to do the best for their students that they possibly could, and it wasn't about them. It wasn't about what they wanted to get out of an ensemble or what they wanted to get out of this. It was about how could they best engender passion for music in people's lives and how that translated. So I was fortunate enough to have some really great teachers growing up and supportive family and all of that kind of stuff. So, and that's probably not unlike many of you. You probably had teachers that you thought, man, if I could be like that when I grow up, that would be a wonderful thing. And then after that, I went to St. Olaf College for my undergraduate degree. St. Olaf, if you don't know, the name is a big name in terms of choral music in the country. The long-standing tradition of choral music there. If you look at any choral history in the United States, and people who write about choral music, from the very kind of genesis of the importance of choral music in the country, there were these two kind of schools of choral music that developed in the United States. And one of them was St. Olaf in Minnesota, and then the other one was Westminster Choir College in Princeton. John Finley Williamson was the longtime director at Westminster Choir College, who kind of got that all going. And then F. Maley's Chris Johnson was the director at St. Olaf, and they were famous for having these two different schools of sound. That the St. Olaf sound was very put in a box, and the women all sounded very straight toned and everything like that. And everything was really hemmed in. And the Westminster Choir College sound was a more free style of singing, and people could sing with more vibrato and all that kind of thing. And so there were these two major pillars of choral music in the country, and that has all kind of completely changed as different directors have gone through there, and that sound ideal is not as true as it used to be with that whole thing. But I had a wonderful experience there. Sang in the St. Olaf Choir for a number of years. One of my primary teachers there was Anton Armstrong, who was dear friends with Dr. Thomas, and was a wonderful mentor to me, and continues to be so in my life. While I was at St. Olaf, I was a freshman, and I at St. Olaf, you know, you go and you're there as a freshman. When I first went to school there as a freshman, I had mono, and you know they do orientation like the week before classes, and so I basically missed all of orientation because I was sick and couldn't go out anything, and I was basically just laying halfway dead in my dorm room the entire time, and it was a really great way to start off my college experience. And I'm fine, you know, I recovered, and the life goes on. But anyway, so at schools, do they do something here where they have like a parents' weekend where parents come like to check in on their kids because they like who knows what might have happened to them in 3 weeks to college. So there was parents' weekend, and there's this group of guys on campus at Parents' Weekend at St. Olaf that were giving this concert, and they were giving a concert in a dorm room lounge, and the name of the group was called Cantus, and they had just started the spring before, and they had gotten together because they wanted to sing the Franz Bibel Ave Maria. Does anyone know the Franz Bibel Ave Maria? Okay, one of the more famous Christmas pieces of all time. It was really made famous by a group called Chanticleer, which is a group from San Francisco, a 12-member a cappella male touring ensemble. And so all these guys in Cantus, of course, we all grew up listening to Chanticleer recordings, and we thought, well, maybe we could do that. And so these guys got together, and they got enough people together so they could perform the Franz Bibel Ave Maria on a student recital at St. Olaf College. And then kind of went their own ways that next summer, came back and did this concert on Parents' Weekend in the dorm room lounge. It's dorm room lounge, and it was a nice dorm room lounge, but it was still a dorm room lounge. And I heard them. I went to the concert with my parents, and I remember going to that concert and just crying and weeping because I thought it was, you know, so beautiful, and this music was just amazing. And then I went to have a voice lesson the next week, and I had a voice lesson the previous week, and my voice professor said, you know, there's this group on campus called Cantus, and they're looking for another tenor and another baritone. So after seeing that concert, I ended up auditioning for the group and got in, and so I was kind of on this, one of the very first years of that group within the first year of its existence. And so this was a thing that just kind of organically happened at St. Olaf. Most of what we would do is on Saturday morning we would get up and we would rehearse. This was 9 guys. We would rehearse, and you know, for a couple hours in the morning, and then we would go to lunch at the cafeteria, and then we'd throw frisbee in the afternoon. And they were good at frisbee, and I wasn't, but that was okay. And we would do that, and then at the end of that, my freshman year, somebody said, well, we should record a CD. And so we stayed a week longer after classes were out and recorded for a week at a local church. And I was working at Interlochen Arts Academy later that summer in the box office for a summer. Interlochen?
2017.
Yay!
Yes, you did.
It's a really nice place because you never have to worry about what to wear, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Interlochen has a dress code where basically everyone wears corduroys or navy blue shorts, and then they wear blue colored shirts, except on Sundays when they wear white.
And Mondays you can choose.
Oh, and okay, maybe that's different then. Things, you know, it's good to have, good to evolve. And I remember going to the library at Interlochen Arts Academy because some of the guys who were designing the CD cover would send proofs of the graphics that we were using, and I would get on the dial-up modem in the library. Does anyone know what that is? You know, that makes me very old. And log in and see the proofs and comment about them and say, well, this looks good, or I don't like this, or you know, all that kind of stuff. CD comes out and we sell out of our first pressing of it of like 500 or 1,000 CDs or something like that really quickly, and we thought, okay, well that's good, maybe we've got something here. And then the next summer we do the same thing for another year. We kind of give some concerts on campus, that next year, one of the concerts we gave was for Parents Weekend, but we moved into the chapel that was on campus, and we thought, okay, we're going to really go for this and try to get some people here. We moved out of a dorm room lounge. We're in a real concert space. So we did what any good college students would do, and we put sidewalk chalk all over the campus. This was before the internet and Facebook, and where there were easy ways to publicize things. You know, we actually had to really work at it back in the day. So we sidewalk chalked the heck out of St. Olaf College, and lo and behold, there were like 1,000 people that show up for this concert, and so we did that, and we thought, well, that was pretty fun. And then the next summer we thought, well, maybe we could do a tour. Okay, so a couple of our guys called a bunch of churches, okay, all the way from Minnesota all the way out to the East Coast, and we called them and we said, well, have we got a deal for you? We will come sing a concert at your church if you will give us the venue, if you will let us sell CDs at the venue, if you'll provide us with host homes, and if you'll also have the host homes pack us a lunch for the next day because we're poor. And which had the effect of all these people at these houses emptying out their pantries, and what we ended up was with, basically it was like 12 guys in a van with this huge bag of extra potato chips. So it was just blowing over, you know, the back of the thing. And we convinced St. Olaf College to give us a van. We all had to go take the safe driving course, you know, if we put out paraphernalia, you know, about the college at the concerts. So we had the van, we had a trailer, and we kind of hit the road. We only had, I think, 3 like actual gigs that whole summer. One was, and I'm talking about like gigs that we were paid for, you know. The rest was this like church, we got a deal for you thing. So there was one art gallery in Springfield, Ohio that had a concert series that we sang on. We sang at the Newport Music Festival. We were one of the groups in Newport, Rhode Island, and then I think we sang at the Pennsylvania State ACDA convention that first summer. And we each came back from that tour after all expenses, you know, and everything like that, just from free will offerings and these few little gigs, staying in host homes the whole night, paying for food along the way. We came back with about $1,500 each in our pocket. We thought that was pretty good, you know, for back in the day. Certainly beat flipping burgers at McDonald's or anything like that. And at that point, we got back together and we thought, oh, we wonder if we could do this. You know, could we do this for real? Could we turn this into an actual job? And so it took a couple of years because a couple of the older guys were seniors. I was still a sophomore, and there were a couple of other sophomores. So there's a 2-year span. Okay, so people were graduating, yet some people were still in college. And so the guys that graduated, they kind of stuck around in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, got random jobs, you know, A couple guys worked at Barnes and Noble. You know, one of them sold pet beds. That was a real barn burner of a job. I worked at Expect First Aid after I graduated my first couple of years, which is a company that refills first aid kits, you know, for various businesses and things. It's just thrilling. And I worked at Kmart in the K Cafe, and the K Cafe is probably the worst of all of the big box store cafes, so I have that distinction of working in the worst of all of them. It was the summer after I graduated from St. Olaf, and I was working in the K Cafe and working as a checkout clerk, and people were coming back to help run the St. Olaf Summer Music Festival, and somebody saw me working at Kmart and snapped a picture of me in my Kmart vest and all that kind of stuff, which got passed around and emblazoned for all history, and still pops up every once in a while, to my disdain. The guys kind of hung out and got odd jobs, but we figured it out. And the rest of us graduated, and so the summer after I graduated from college, we had a gig at the Massachusetts State ACDA convention, okay? So we drove out to Massachusetts to sing. Before that gig, had heard and had gotten a call from an organization in New York City called Herbert Barrett Management, which is one of the companies that manages performing artists. And Herbert Barrett Management was the management company for Chanticleer, was the group that we kind of patterned ourselves after and always looked up to. And one of the former members of Chanticleer, a gentleman by the name of Frank Albinder, who now lives in Washington, D.C. and directs the Washington Men's Camerata, great guy. Frank Albinder was upset at Chanticleer because Chanticleer just left Herbert Barrett. They had just left Herbert Barrett Management to go with one of the bigger management companies. You know, there's kind of these middle tier things, and then there's the top tier management companies in New York City like ICM and CAMI and IMG, and you know, who manage like Domingo and Kiger Woods and you know, all of these kinds of people. Anyway, Frank Albinder calls them and says, you know, I know you've got a hole in your roster because Chanticleer has left. I've heard of these guys from Minnesota. Why don't you go give them a listen? I hear they're performing at the ACDA convention. And so we went out there, a couple guys from Herbert Barrett Management drove up, heard the concert, and they signed us the next week. And that was basically the beginning of us, like, you know, being able to do this for real. And so the first year that I graduated from St. Olaf, Cantus was basically like a half-time job. So I'm working at Expect First Aid, and then going on tour, and coming back working at Expect First Aid, going on tour. And then the second year out, it was about a 3/4 time job, and then my third year out, it was basically a full-time job. And that was my life for about 8 years or so post graduation as an undergrad. I was touring around the country, singing professionally, singing about 120 concerts a year. We were on the road for about 80 days out of the year. You know, when we started, I think when I just graduated college and we started, I think we had a budget of like $150,000 a year or something like that. And when I left, we had a budget of $750,000 a year, and we were fundraising, you know, a couple $100,000 a year. We were a nonprofit organization with a board of directors, and we were paying people salaries and withholding taxes and providing people with health care and dental plans, and you know, all the kinds of things that people do as they're adulting, you know, nowadays. We were adulting before adulting was adulting, and that whole experience was really an unbelievable one, because none of us really knew how to do this. We all just basically had to figure it out as we went along, right? And it was a huge risk for all of us to do this, because many of us were ed majors. We could have gotten teaching jobs or something like that, and so we basically said, we think this is worth it to try to make this happen, and go from there. And this experience I'll never forget, and you know, defined me in a lot of ways in terms of how I think about things in the world, and in so many ways. and if you're stuck in a van with people for 18 days a month, and you're on the road with them for 120 days out of the year, you become extremely good friends with them too. And so I'm still close with a number of the guys and all that kind of thing. The group's still going on, still exists in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. I think they've got like $1.5 million budget now, and it's a much bigger deal than it was when I left. But I'm really proud that that group has continued and is thriving yet to this day. This spring will be the 25th anniversary of that group, and so a lot of us alums are coming back to sing and to be part of a kind of a reunion thing in Minneapolis in the spring. So that was my experience there, and unforgettable. On the other side of it, I was also starting to get more serious with the woman who's now my wife, and who at that time I was falling in love with, and it was becoming harder and harder to be on the road and to be gone for long periods of time. And so, as cool as that whole life is, it's also it's not something a lot of people can do forever. Life becomes more complicated, and you have children and fall in love and all these kinds of things. Hopefully, in the other way around. But anyway, so the deal was that I decided that Holiday Inn Expresses are not as cool as they once used to be. I really feel like I love choral music, and so the thing that made sense for me was to maybe go on to try to do some further study in choral conducting. And I had been asked to conduct a wedding choir of one of my friends. And if you're a Minnesotan and you have choral music running through your veins all the time, you get asked to sing in a wedding choir often. If somebody gets married, they put a choir together. This choir is at like every occasion. It's like a military band, So I got asked to conduct this wedding choir of a friend of mine, and I was asked to conduct one piece, and then the other person that got asked to conduct another piece was Anton Armstrong, who was one of the more famous choral directors in the country, and my teacher, and I was of course just scared out of my mind to do that whole thing, and I did it, and I kind of really liked it, and I had a good time, and I went out to lunch with Dr. Armstrong afterwards, and said, I kind of think I might want to do this for real, and I think it might be time to leave Cantus. And he kind of looked at me and was like, I wondered if you were kind of enjoying that. So my wife and I left the Twin Cities. We went to Michigan State for 2 years and got master's degrees there, which is a wonderful school, wonderful graduate programs in music and choral music in particular. And then went straight there to here. My wife's a pianist, so she got a master's degree in piano at Michigan State. She got a PhD in piano pedagogy while she was here. And we spent 3 years at this wonderful place and developed some amazing friends and just kind of got the bug about what makes FSU so special and such a great place to be a part of. Fell in love with the people and the culture here. And there's an FS way of kind of acting and being a human being and being a person that really appealed to us, and so we loved our time here. And once we left, I spent a semester teaching at St. Olaf as a sabbatical replacement position for one of the conductors there, and after that got a job at Wichita State University in the middle of Kansas. So my wife and I went there, and we have been there for the last 7 years. I've been directing choral activities at Wichita State, which then means I directed a couple choirs there. I was director of the Wichita Symphony Orchestra Chorus, and then had a wonderful church job with about 20 paid soloists in my choir every Sunday, and we could do lots of wonderful things and get away with it. And all that kind of thing. So we spent our last 7 years there. My wife was also on faculty. She had a full-time tenure-track job at Wichita State. So we loved it there, and we were not really looking to leave. If you ever go into academia, you know that the ability to find 2 tenure-track jobs at an institution, the same place, is pretty hard. So it would take a place like Florida State, to make a jump and to leave, and fortunately that happened. And while we were there, we had a son. We have one son, Sebastian, who's 5 years old, and he's wonderful and has already started giving me hell every morning. He started burning me with comments already. He knows that I call myself an aspirationally reliable husband, and what I mean by that is I'm not reliable, and the fact that if like my wife asks me to do something, like can you stop at Target and pick up something on the way home, there's about 50% of the time I will forget, you know, and I'll get home and I'll walk in the door and my wife will say, so did you remember to pick up that at Target? I'm like, shoot, I forgot, you know. And so my son this morning, as I'm leaving the house this morning, my son says, he's talking to my wife there, and we're all standing in the kitchen. I'm kind of just putting a couple last things in my bag before I walk out the door, and I hear him say to my wife, he says, do you need me to get anything on my way home? And my wife says, yeah, I could just, and he gets all dressed up like me, like he puts on like those sport coat and jeans like every day, you know, and like, and he comes like into the garage and like he gives me a hug, and then I always go to it's cute. So he's kind of like emulating me as he leaves the house, and so he asks my wife, he says, can I pick up anything on the way home, you know? And my wife says, yeah, could you stop at Trader Joe's and get a pizza or something like that? And he's like, oh, I forgot. So yeah, he's a smart aleck. So that's just a little bit about my background. I'm just thrilled to be back here. Like I said, I think this is an amazing place, and such an amazing collection of people and human beings, and an amazing tradition of producing such wonderful teachers, and also just producing people that are active and engaged in the profession, like all of you showed up on a Friday after the Downton Abbey Friday afternoon ACDA meeting, and truly, you are at such a great place. You're at such a great place, and you will, I don't think, ever regret your decision to be here and be a part of this wonderful community. And you will, the longer you're away from here after you leave, the more I think you'll appreciate it, as that network of people is a resource for you and nurtures you and helps you and in your careers and all of that. And a couple quick stories that I'll share just as a food for thought. As you all go through your school year and beyond and all that kind of thing. When I was a high school student, okay, I was my hometown was very close to this small Lutheran school in Iowa by the name of Luther College. Small liberal arts school. There's a lot of small liberal arts Lutheran schools up in the upper Midwest. Kind of a mafia, and they it's kind of mafia that wears robes and sings in 4-part harmony, you know. But Luther College was hosting a career day where you could go as a high school student and pick a couple topics about what thought you wanted to do with your life, and go hear people speak about those different topics. And so I signed up for career day at Luther College, and I got up there and I'd signed up for 2 things. Okay, I thought I might be interested in being an architect. And that was before I realized I couldn't draw. And then I also thought that I might be interested in being in music. So I'd signed up for that. And so I went to the morning session, which was the architecture session, and I sat through this presentation from this architect from Des Moines, who was, I'm sure, a really nice guy and probably a very good architect, but it wasn't very engaging as a presenter, wasn't real interesting to hear talk to, and I was just kind of, okay, well that was fine, and you know, all that kind of thing. And I went out and had lunch, and then I got back, and it was time for the music session in the afternoon. And so here I am, sitting in this room, and in walks a man by the name of Weston Noble, who is the longtime choral director at Luther College. If you don't know the name Weston Noble, you should do some research on Weston Noble and kind of learn about him. There have been very few people in choral music just that kind of had a way about them, kind of like Mr. Noble did. I mean, he was kind of this little elf-like looking guy, and just, I mean, you would imagine this kind of like halo around him the entire time as he was walking around the world. And he always made you feel like you were the most special person in the room, you know, at any given time. So I'm sitting in this session, right? I'm sitting in this session, and he goes around and asks every person individually who's sitting here. He asks every person, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Okay. And I'm waiting just nervously, you know, as he goes around to every people, and he finally gets to me, and he says, "Well, what's your name?" And I said, "Well, I'm Michael Hanawalt." He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Waverly, Iowa." And he winked at me and he said, "Never heard of it," because my high school choir director was a Lutheran grad, and of course had him as a student. And so, and he said, "Well, Michael, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Well, I think I might want to be an architect." And he looked at me and he just kind of nodded for a little bit. He said, "You know, it sounds kind of scary." And he said, "What do you really want to be?" I thought, "Oh, geez, I can't draw, that's right. Maybe I should pick up something." So I thought to myself, well, you know, if I had a choice, I think I'd like to be in a group like the King Singers, you know, an a cappella group that tours around the country and sings concerts and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "It sounds like you should really do that." And you know, a couple years later, here I am at St. Olaf, and like this group is forming at the same time, and that's the whole first part of my career. It's the closest thing to a prophecy I've ever received. You don't expect to have a prophecy vested upon you, you know, at a given moment in time, but that was the closest thing to some kind of you know, deitistic representative bestowing on me some kind of prophecy. So and what I thought about, what I've since processed and kind of learned from that is the idea that that one, and I am a firm believer in this, one should absolutely do what they love. And I probably could have been an okay architect, or good architect, I don't know. I mean, I would have maybe had to have people draw for me, but I could have like figured out ideas and things about stuff. But as many issues that are in play in today's society, and as many complications that exist in our lives, to have something that you can go to do every day that feeds you, and that is meaningful to you, and that gives you some kind of an emotional fuel to live by, and to make you feel like there's something inside of you that is invigorating at all times, is irreplaceable. It's irreplaceable. And so for all of you who will eventually go out and student teach and do, you know, be in the classroom and all that kind of thing, the first couple of years can be hard. They can be really tough. You can be in situations where who knows what happened before you, and you're trying to change a culture, or maybe you follow somebody who's really popular and you're trying to make your own way in the middle of all of that, and you find your place in this whole thing as a first-time teacher, and just don't quit and lose sight of why you're in this. And I never forget the time I felt when I first heard Cantus sing in that dorm room lounge at St. Olaf College, and the way that made me feel, and the way I subsequently felt so many nights singing with them, you know, over and over and over again. And so never lose sight of what is really giving you strength as a person, and what is really feeding you as a person, and whatever that is, do that. Don't become an architect just because you think you should. Okay, become an architect if you really will want to be an architect, but don't become an architect if you. And somebody from the Architectural Association of America is going to hunt me down, but do what you love. Life is short. Okay, life is short. And the older you get, and I turn 42 tomorrow, the older you get, the more you realize life is short, and I've still got plenty of years to live, hopefully, but the older you get, you think about that, you know, and you don't necessarily think about that when you're in school. The other thing is this, so Cantus, when we would travel, we always had usually two vans that we would travel in. Okay, a lot of times it's two minivans or something like that. Or if we were touring, we would say we were touring the Southeast U.S. We would fly to, let's say, Atlanta or something, and then we'd rent 2 minivans and drive around, concertize, and then we'd fly back to Minneapolis at the end of that. So we were often traveling in 2 vans, and the vans were divided up by people who either wanted to get to the destination as fast as they possibly could, okay, would stop for McDonald's and Subways, anything that was close to the interstate as possible, and get on with life and get there and get to the hotel and watch Jeopardy and all that kind of stuff. And then the other van was a group of people who we had this book called Road Food, which is made popular by Jane and Michael Stern, who are on the NPR contributors to a show called The Splendid Table, which is an eating show on the weekend, and had a book of every little diner and dive. It was before diners, drive-ins, and dives became a thing. This was like the NPR version of diners, drive-ins, without the crazy bleached hair and all that kind of stuff. And so we would kind of, this van would find these little hole-in-the-wall places and, kind of take our time and get there. And so there were always 2 vans, and that was kind of how it was divided up. And it was fascinating to me that every single time we would get to a hotel or a concert venue, and we would be laughing and enjoying each other's company and all having a great time. And then the next morning we got up to travel to the next place. We'd get in these 2 vans. You wouldn't believe how easy it was to dislike the people in the other van, because they were bad drivers. They braked too quickly. It was forced you to kind of brake quickly too, or they were left lane cruisers. They hung out in the left lane, or they didn't signal. When they changed lanes, or this was back in the day before GPS, and so we had MapQuest. Did anybody ever know what MapQuest was? Basically, you would log on the internet, and they would print you out a sheet of directions. So we had these notebooks, things of directions about where we were supposed to go, and so the one van would speed through a red light and leave us stuck at the red light and not together, and we'd have to try to catch up to them, and so you started to develop, just because you weren't with them, you developed this seething hatred for the other van, even though you were friends with them, you hated them. You hated the other van. And then you would get to the concert venue and everything would be fine, and then you'd get back in your van and your blood pressure would start to rise and all that kind of stuff. And I think about that often, because the great thing about choir is everyone gets to be in one van. Right? Everyone gets to be in one band. And it's incumbent upon all of us as future musicians and educators to establish a culture and an environment in which everyone feels like they're in the same band. There's lots of talk about making points of, it's a very active palm. Because the palm bridge is outside and not in here, I dislike it, because it's Karen in my, it's a different room. Yeah, but there's a lot of there's a lot of ways in our society where we find a lot of areas in which we find ways to differentiate ourselves. Right? We're from a different country, or we speak a different language, or we're of a different religion, or different sexual orientation, or different culture, and then all these reasons are talked about as vehicles through which we can become suspicious of other people that we may not know as well or understand quite as well, all that kind of thing. So I think we have to actively fight as teachers and educators to create an environment in which we have one band, that we're not putting up walls. So a lot of talk about walls and all that kind of stuff, and that we're creating a society in which we have a level of mutual understanding and mutual respect. And choir is an amazing vehicle for that. One of the best I can think of, if not the best, because it allows a group of people working together to have an aesthetic experience. Some beautiful music that is infused with a text that might be meaningful, or incredibly impactful to somebody or relevant at that point or time in their lives where it really speaks to them. And it is just a complete petri dish of possibilities, you know. Bacteria is not quite the right metaphor for the choir, but it's the perfect place in which that kind of mutual understanding, it's a group of people working together for the purposes of excellence, can have that thing. So never lose sight of that's part of your job as a teacher and an educator is to create that environment in which excellence can happen, not at the expense of exclusion. Not at the expense of exclusion. All right? So I've talked for plenty of time, and you guys are probably all wanting to go and be with friends and all, and I know you've got some business to take care of and all that stuff. But I hope to see. I know that I'm doing a lot of work with graduate students here. That doesn't mean that I don't like you. I already like you a lot, I can tell. And I hope to get to work with as many of you as possible. And the chamber choir at Tallahassee Community Chorus, or any capacity that our paths could cross, I would welcome that opportunity. You are not in another band to me. We're all in one band here at Florida State, one big, very large band. And I'm going to enjoy being a part of that experience with all of you. So thanks so much for inviting me to come talk.